Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, I'm James Salvatore, and today's video is going to be an exciting one. To the left of me is the 2021 Porsche Taycan base car, and to the right is the Taycan 4S. And in today's video, I'm going to be going into detail telling you the differences between these two cars, and then I'm going to take them out on the road and share my opinions on the driving experiences with you. But like always, before we get into the video, be sure to smash the like button for me because it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notification so you're alerted when I post future videos. On the channel, I do new car reviews, new car comparisons, classics, exotics. So if that's your thing, be sure to stick around. And with that said, cue the cinematics. Twenty 2020 was a crazy year for us all. It's kind of hard to believe that Porsche successfully launched what is arguably the best performance electric car in the market, period, with the Taycan Turbo and Turbo S last year. Now, I've been fortunate enough to drive both of those cars, both on the street and track. So if you haven't seen those videos, be sure to check them out after this video. But getting back to these cars, why these cars are so significant is because last year when we only had the Turbo and the Turbo S models, they only appealed to such a very narrow segment of the market, seeing that they were $150,000 plus cars. These are way more obtainable in the grand scope of things. To the left of me, the base car here starts at around $80,000, and on the right, the 4S starts at $103,000. I mean, they go up pretty quickly from there, but if you wanted one, right at that price point and you ordered it base, you can get it for that price. And it's an incredible car for the money. So let's get into the details on what makes these two so special. All right, as soon as you get into the Taycan, the first thing that you're greeted with is a fully digital curved instrument cluster, which is really, really interesting, seeing that no other vehicle kind of does it quite like this. I like that they've kept kind of the traditional shape of a normal gauge cluster, but have put a modern twist on it. On the sides here, you'll see that you have your controls that are touch capacitive for your headlights and whatnot. And on the right side, you'll see that you have your drive select buttons, your suspension buttons, and on the 4S, you'll see an air suspension button right here. Moving on to the infotainment system, you can see that we have a dual screen setup. You have a screen down here that primarily controls your HVAC. However, you have something that's pretty interesting. You have basically a touch trackpad that controls the top screen here if that's something you want. However, I kind of just find it easier just to go right for this. One interesting thing to note about the navigation in this car is it does use Google Maps like the other Porsches. So you can have that nice, cool looking map. However, one thing that they've added with the electric vehicles is that if you set a destination and you're using the stock software, it will actually calculate your route based on and around fast charging stations, so you can continue along your route as efficient as possible. And then one thing that I found interesting is that you could open your trunk, your frunk, and your trunk using the touch buttons here, which is kind of funny. And another important thing to note is that you do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto capability in this car. Sitting behind myself, I'm about 6'1". The Taycan has pretty good headroom. However, I think anybody taller than me really wouldn't fit back here. Like if I was 6'3", I'd be kind of, crouching my head in there. Leg room is pretty decent. I have the front seat set up just as I was when I was sitting in the driver's seat. So you can see that there's a little bit of room. However, again, I'd say anybody 6'2", 6'3" and up would not be comfortable back here. But one nice thing is the panoramic sunroof that stretches the whole length of the interior. It really makes things feel open in here and just so modern and sleek. And moving around to the rear, you can see we got 14.4 cubic feet of cargo storage in the rear, which is kind of small for how large this vehicle is. However, if you really need it, you can put down the rear seats. But enough talking about these, let's get them out on the road and see how they drive. All right, here we go in the 4S. Now, the first thing that'll hit you if you haven't driven a Taycan yet is just like how well this car wraps around you. Now, it's a larger car. I mean, it's not as large as a Panamera, but it's just about the same size. And it's amazing how much more this wraps around you than the Panamera. I mean, you feel like one with this car. You're sitting so low, right down onto the road. It's the closest feeling you get to a 911 without it being a 911 with 4 seats. And this 4S model is kind of like the sweet spot. It's like in between the crazy cars and, you know, affordable enough where, you know, it's obtainable for a lot of people. So this is going to be the sweet spot for a lot of people. But right away, I mean, like, you still getting all that torque, that, you know, that shove in the back that initially blew me away the first time I drove a Turbo S. I mean, if you haven't driven the Turbo S and you go right into this thing, I mean, this feels fast. It's very punchy off the line. The torque is instant in this vehicle. And what will surprise you, especially for anybody, you know, who has the opportunity to do track driving, is how well these cars handle on the track. With the air suspension, these cars are just dead flat in the corners. I mean, they're amazing, amazing. I can't say enough about the handling on this. That's why I'm curious to see how well the base car without air suspension does in the corners. But, you know, as far as being kind of like, you know, an everyday driver, I think the only thing that'll really limit you on these cars is just how many miles a day do you drive? And if the answer, like me, personally, I drive close to 1,000 miles every week, an electric car in general right now just isn't the right fit for me. But if you're somebody who maybe does 50 miles a day at most, or maybe even less than that, I don't really think you'll have a problem, because, you know, if you leave it charging overnight, even though it charges slower, you know, at your home, you should be able to always have a decent charge. But I mean, what will put a smile on your face right away is, like, watch this. I'm just gonna tap the throttle. I mean, just look at that. That just like instant shove in the back. I mean, it really puts you back in your seat. I'm not exaggerating. The torque is amazing. I think the only downside to these cars is, you know, if you're an automotive enthusiast and you love having a sweet exhaust note behind you, this experience is lacking in that aspect, obviously, because you don't have any sound. And, you know, if you've never really paid attention to electric cars before this, I mean, you don't shift, there's no shifting of the gears, you know, there's no monitoring RPMs. But where this is really satisfying is just the brutal acceleration off the line and at speed. The torque numbers in this vehicle really don't speak for themselves on paper. It's, you know, I've driven cars with more torque than this, and it's just how brutal this delivers that power that just really throws you back in your seat and blows you away. But the 4S to me is kind of a good balance, because it's enough power to blow everybody away that you're going to take for a ride, but, you know, be usable on public roads. I mean, the Turbo and the Turbo S, you really can't use on public roads, because as soon as you lay into the accelerator, you're going over 100 miles an hour. There's really, like, it's that quick in those cars. This is satisfying. It's kind of like the right amount of power. I mean, look, just lay into it. I mean, right there, that's 50 miles an hour. And that's like maybe a second on the throttle. It's very fast. I mean, the Turbo S would have probably been at like 75 with that little dip into the throttle. That's the difference. But do you need to be at 75? I mean, that's what you kind of got to think of. In terms of ride comfort, This is really, really a comfortable car when you set everything in comfort. The air suspension really does a good job at soaking everything up, but you still get a lot of feedback and communication with what's going on the road. It's not like a numb experience. You know, it's not like it turns into an S-Class where you can't feel anything on the road, and it doesn't dip into the corners when you put it in comfort mode because it self-levels itself. All right, we got a little stretch of road. Let's lay into it a little bit, shall we? Wow. This is still properly quick. Yeah, just lay it right into the corner. Very, very, very minimal body roll. I'd say that the Turbo and the Turbo S have a little bit less body roll, but it's just oh so slight in this one. I guess the air suspension's tuned slightly different in this, but handles that corner like nothing. And seeing that this is all-wheel drive, you know, if you live in an area where you have snow and whatnot, you really don't have to worry about anything. You know, you'll get around every season no problem, where, you know, if you live in the Northeast or just in areas with snow, you're definitely not going to want the base Taycan because you got a lot of torque, it's rear wheel drive, it's going to spin up the tires like nothing. You know, we'll drive that next, but this is just so well planted. It puts all the power down. You can use every bit of this car. You know, there's no being scared of it. It's just a precision instrument. So if I had to summarize the things that I really like about the Taycan, in general, not just the 4S, it's the driving position, it's how easy it is to see out of this. I mean, a lot of cars today, the visibility in them is just horrible. I think, you know, I feel like auto manufacturers felt they had a free pass in making a million blind spots in vehicles just because you have all these cameras now. Porsche does a good job about that in most of their vehicles, about, you know, visibility, being able to see out of, you know, the sides of the vehicle, the rear, and, you know, really get a nice concept of where the front end is, you know, through the front there. That's just kind of like a signature thing that they do. And in this car, because you have nothing in the hood, you have that nice sloped down hood, so it feels like you're sitting right on the road, and then you have the wheel arches coming off to the sides, you know, just helping you place it. You know where your wheels are. It's very easy to tell where you're going to be in a corner in this car. It's just very confidence inspiring. And even though this is electric power steering, you know, with an electric motor on the front end of this feels very responsive. You know, the slightest inputs into the steering transfers directly into the road. I can't wait to see if the steering is going to be even more responsive in the rear-wheel drive car, seeing that you're not going to have as much going on in the front end. But this car just does such a good job of putting the power down. I think the only thing that I'm not quite a fan of is the brake feel. I have to say, the brake feel in like a 911 is just a little bit sharper. I mean, by no means, you know, is the brake feel in this car bad at all. It's just slight things that you notice between products. And if you're new to the Porsche brand, I think one of the things that you could take away from every single car that they put out is they're all very well balanced. You know, they don't throw a crazy amount of power into it if the body can't handle it going around corners, or it doesn't have the brakes to match it. So because it's such a balanced package, it's just very, very well rounded. All right, I'd say that we've covered the 4S pretty well. Now let's hop into the base car. All right, and here we are in the base car. And you know, the first thing that hits me right away, there's subtle odd differences that you wouldn't expect to be different between the two cars. First off, the first thing I tried doing was putting my seat to the floor like I had in the 4S, and for some reason you sit a little higher in this car, which I personally don't like. I like being really down low in the car and closer to the road. My hunch is that with the way they had to position the batteries maybe in this, they had to raise the seating position a little bit. That's my guess. Not really sure why they did that, but it's just something I noticed as soon as I got in. The next thing I noticed is my gripe with the 4S having a little bit of a spongy brake feel and, you know, not feeling as responsive as I'd like it to be. That goes away in the base car, which is kind of odd, but I think that might be because we don't have the air suspension in this car. And you do notice that there's no air suspension right away. Everything's a bit more firm. I haven't been able to see if there's body roll yet. We're going to be approaching a turn in probably a minute or two. But the air suspension, the brake-by-wire system, sends calculations to that air suspension, so it accounts for the dive when you go to hit the brakes, and I think that's where that lag may be coming from. Whereas with this, you don't have the air suspension, so there's really just no lag, which I like. You do notice right away, I mean, you know, lay your foot into it, you don't get that shove in the back. You know, you don't get that crazy shove of torque in the back that, you know, makes you laugh like you do get in the 4S. The 4S still gives you that feeling that you get in the Turbo and the Turbo S. This feels nowhere close to that. It's not a bad car by any means, but it's just really not as fast. I mean, we're all out flat in this, and yeah, you do notice body roll in the corners without the air suspension for sure, and it's not as fast. It's still a quick car, but you got to keep in mind these cars are over 4,500 pounds. You need a lot of power to move that if you want it to, you know, be a crazy, you know, exciting, exhilarating ride. The 4S definitely still delivers on that, whereas I really don't feel that this does. It just doesn't do it for me like the 4S does. So I think if I had to hold out and, you know, I knew maybe if I waited 6 more months I can afford the 4S, I would 100% go for that. If you have the means and you're just wondering, is the 4S actually worth it? You know, is it worth spending, you know, $20,000, $25,000 more for? I would say all day. Yeah, 100%. But, you know, if you're somebody that's looking for, you know, something that still has great performance, you know, this is still a great car. It's just, it's not the true Taycan experience, in my opinion. I really am siding strong with the 4S. I like it much better. I think that it gives you the experience that you get in the Turbo and the Turbo S in just a much less expensive package with really no downside, in my opinion. This is definitely a great entry point, and I feel that, you know, if you look at how much the Turbo S costs versus how much this costs, I feel that the decrease in performance is justified. Now, the other side to that is, this is just under $100,000. As tested here, this is $97,000. And I would say this is a more luxurious experience because, you know, because it's at the lower price point, you could spec the full leather interior, get the nice Bose sound system, and really have the other amenities. Whereas, you know, in the 4S, if you're looking to get into that at the lower end, you're going to be getting a more stripped car. Like, for instance, the one we were just in didn't have the leather interior, and this one does. Just a thought. I mean, if you're not somebody who cares about having that much power behind you, and you want something that's quick and that's still a lot of fun, I'd say that this is still fun. I'm just being brutally honest. Overall, here are my recommendations between the base car and the 4S. My personal choice is the 4S all day long. I think it's the best all-around package for the money, and if you have the means to go for it, I'd say 4S all day long. There's no disadvantages. You have all-wheel drive, so you have that 4-season capability. It's got just the right amount of power. It'll still throw you back in your seat. I mean, you saw in this car, it's not as fast. It doesn't have that throw in the back. It doesn't have that theater that the other car has. And it's still a nice package overall. It's just, you know, if you have the means to spend the $20,000, $25,000 more, the 4S is the better car all day long. But I mean, you know, it is, you know, it's more money. It should be. But I'm just saying, you know, if you're wondering if it's worth it, it 100% is. My recommendation, though, is if you don't have the means to get the 4S and you can only afford the base model, don't test drive a 4S, because if you don't know what you're missing, you'll really appreciate this car. It's a very well-built car overall. I mean, you know, you're getting a fully electric, masterfully engineered Porsche. I mean, like, you know, the quality, you know, especially if you get this interior with the full leather, it's a special place to be. And you're getting an exclusive look in this car, too. There's nothing on the road that looks like these cars. I mean, they're just gorgeous. You know, you see these rolling down the road and you're like, wow, that looks cool. That's the future. Overall, yeah, I'd go with the 4S any day of the week if you have the means, but if not, definitely still try this. Give it a shot. Don't take me ragging on the car because it's not as quick as the 4S as it being a bad car. It's just you have to make these decisions for yourself. I share my opinions on the driving experiences to help you kind of sort, what you think is better for you to go spend time looking at. So hopefully this helps. Well, that wraps up this video. I hope it helped you out. Before we go though, be sure to help me out by smashing that like button for the YouTube algorithm so I can keep bringing awesome content to you. And be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss out on future content. Before we go though, I'd like to say a special thanks to my friends down at Porsche of Fairfield for making this video possible. They're an awesome, super helpful, friendly group of people to work with. And if you're in the market for a new Porsche, be sure to check them out. I'm going to leave their link in the description below so you can do so. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next video.